Welcome back to Girl Take the Lead, the podcast where we explore real, raw, and remarkable stories of people breaking cycles, finding freedom, and leading with courage. Today's guest is Sarah M. Eden, a USA Today best-selling author and screenwriter whose witty, award-winning historical novels have sold over 1 million copies worldwide. With more than 85 titles to her name, Sarah weaves together her love of history and her passion for tender, hopeful storytelling. In this conversation, we explore what it means to truly find the heart of story, how creativity helps us see meaning everywhere, and how hope lives within the romance genre, and what it takes to bring a beloved novel to life on screen. Sarah also shares the inspiration behind her upcoming film, Seeking Persephone, and the lesson she's learned from both physics and life, that opposition gives us lift. Her reflections remind us that stories aren't just what we write, they're how we live, grow, and rediscover joy through the moments that shape us. Let's jump in. Here you go. So, welcome to the show, Sarah. We're going to have such a good time talking about your books.
Oh, I'm excited to be here.
Thanks for joining us. Why don't we start, if you would, to just sort of introduce yourself to our audience?
Yeah, you bet. I'm Sarah M. Eden. I'm a writer, mostly of historical fiction. I write books. I will have my 85th will release at the end of this year. So quite a few stories under my belt. I also write screenplays. A movie I wrote just had its trailer drop fairly recently, so that's been very exciting. Another one I wrote just finished filming in August. So lots going on, lots of stories in my head that I enjoy putting down on the page.
So, tell me, were you always a writer, like from the minute you could do your letters and stuff?
Not even a little. Like it's actually kind of strange. You 100% expect writers to say, I've always wanted to be a writer. It's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
been like my dream. Not at all for me. I didn't start really writing until I was an adult. And I started writing on a dare, not because I was drawn to it. So, very strange path to being a writer for me.
So, 85 books.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Your mind just like must go, because I know for me, for podcasting, right? I'm at 200 something, and people go, wow, that's a lot. But it's like your mind doesn't turn off. Like you go, oh, I could do an episode on
Right.
that. Is that kind of what happens for you?
100%. I think that's the case probably with most creative people, that the longer you're working in a creative medium or creative field, it's like we're training our brains to see that everywhere.
Mm,
Like I'm sure your brain constantly will latch onto something that would be a great topic or someone who'd be a great guest because you've trained your mind to see that. I think writers, it's the same. We train our minds to see stories and to pick up on the seeds of what could become a great story. You start to see it everywhere the longer you've been doing it.
well, tell us about the tides of time. It's such a cool, like story.
Yeah, it is my first time travel that I've written. It's time travel is not something I ever expected to write. I like I said, I write almost entirely historical fiction, very much set in reality. But I was in Paris at the La Conciergerie, which is a former palace turned prison during the French Revolution, and I was touring it because I'm an absolute history nerd. You get me in a museum, and I'm as happy as I will ever be. And I'm touring because it's a museum now. So I was
Mhm.
touring it, and there's a room in there where they have covered the walls, every inch of the walls, with the names of people who were imprisoned there during the French Revolution. It
Mm.
lists their name, their occupation, or their title if they were, of the aristocracy, and then their ultimate fate, whether they were executed or not. And it was just overwhelming, the names, and it was just from this very brief period of history. And I came across a name there of someone who their occupation was seamstress, and she was in the end executed. And I thought, what threat could a seamstress have actually been? It just drove home how impossible it was to escape the violence and the upheaval of this time period. And as I'm sitting there, because again, we see stories everywhere, I thought not only what is her story or the story of all of these people here, and then what hope was there of escaping it without leaving behind this era entirely? And that was the moment when I thought, time travel.
Yeah.
What about a story where someone is deep in the throes and violence of the French Revolution and travels across time? What would that look like? How would that impact them down the road? Because maybe they've escaped, but the guilt comes with you.
Right.
The violence of what you've seen comes with you. So that was the seeds of this story, and that's exactly what it became.
Yeah. Do you think all good writers are good storytellers? Because when I'm listening to you, I'm like, she is so good at storytelling. I am like there with you. I'm like, oh, good. Yeah, right. But do you think that's a characteristic?
I think if someone wants to be a writer of fiction, um, and they aren't a good storyteller, they're going to become one
Yeah.
because you spend so much time deep in stories that I think it's something you will develop if you don't already have it. Not all writers are good verbal storytellers, but
Mhm.
I think they understand the nuts and bolts of story. They understand the heart of story, and it comes out at least on the page if they aren't, a verbal storyteller. But yeah, storytelling is so essential to fiction and to writing that I think, if nothing else, you develop that knack for it
Yeah.
because you have to tell a good story on the page.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite part in the book, The Tides of Time?
I think probably what I enjoyed the most about writing it and composing it comes from having a background of just loving history and loving research. For me, it was discovering how much had changed between 1793 and
Mm.
1873. It's only 80 years that our heroine is thrust into the future, but it's so different. So much changed in such a short amount of time. That was so interesting to explore. What would that look like? What would it, how would it be overwhelming? Is it that nothing changed and she wouldn't even know? But the more I looked into it, massive changes happened in that era. And as readers are looking back into the 1870s, what feels like so old and so historic to us that we don't think anything would be new. It's all old timey. And yet for this person, modern to the point of being overwhelming. I loved that exploration of old things being new at some point because they all were. And that was a fun
Yeah.
thing to explore.
Oh. So you don't have to answer this question because I know if someone asked me this question, I would probably not answer it. But do you have a favorite book that you've done? Like you're 85?
I always say my favorite book is whichever one I am currently drafting because it's
Okay.
still shiny and new and fun. And my
Okay.
least favorite book is whichever one I just finished editing because I have torn it apart and I don't even like it anymore. So that is an honest answer. Whichever one is still shiny and new, that's probably my favorite for
Oh,
the
that's so
moment.
good. I'll have to remember that if someone ever asks me, what's your favorite podcast episode?
Right.
I
It's
can
the
tell
one you haven't
people,
had to edit yet.
or I can tell people, well, I can tell you the one that most people have listened to that they really like.
Yes.
That's a
Right,
really
which
good
isn't
one.
always going to be the same, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the one that the creative thing you're most proud of isn't necessarily your most popular, or maybe the one you enjoyed writing the most isn't necessarily the one people have related to most. It's interesting. Once we've created something and tossed it out into the world, it's not really ours anymore because the interaction and experience people have with it is 100% theirs. So
Yeah.
we have to kind of learn to to own our side of it while allowing it to have the life we give it when we send it out into the world.
So did you feel that way about the film based on it's Seeking Persephone, right? That the
Right.
film will be based on. So did you feel with that one like, oh, this surprised me. I didn't think that would be the one that would get the film, but
I think as an author, most of us feel like a lot of our stories could make very good films. This one for me made a lot of sense. Because it's the first in its series, it's the first in a whole universe of books, but it also has some elements that are popular and kind of easy to pitch, I guess is what it comes down to. It's a retelling of the myth of Hades and Persephone, which
Mhm.
many will argue is the original Beauty and the Beast story. So that's easy to explain to people, and it's a very popular trope. It's a popular story archetype, so that's easy to kind of pitch. But it's retold as a Jane Austen era romance, which
Uh-huh.
that is also an easy thing to pitch and a popular genre. And it takes place in like a great setting, a very moody castle out, isolated in a forest. So it has elements that I think are very, very visual and very appealing. So it made for a good one to start that kind of universe off on. And yeah, it's been very well received so far. So fingers crossed.
Yeah. Now, is that the one you just got the trailer for, or is that?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, that's the one. Very exciting.
so exciting for you.
Yeah.
Congratulations. I imagine on one hand, you don't get to control what somebody does with the story. I mean, I know you probably have a little bit in the contract of how close they have to be to the book or whatever, but I it's like watching your child kind of grow like without
Yeah.
you,
Yeah,
right?
I think most writers have almost zero impact on an adaptation. I also happen to be the screenwriter for this, so I had a lot of say, obviously, in the script. Um, but that's very seldom the case because screenwriting and novel writing are two very different skill sets, and not a lot
Yeah.
of writers have both. But um, yeah, it's still because it's shifting to a new medium. Some aspects of it have to change. Some things have to be cut out. And yeah, in some ways, it almost feels like you're letting someone cut your baby up. Even when that someone is you, it still
Yeah.
has to happen. Yeah. So it's been a really, really neat experience. But yeah, you learn to look at your own stories differently because when they're told in a new medium, they have to change. So you learn very quickly to get down to what is the heart and soul of this story, because that's what
Mhm.
you preserve, and the rest you have to be willing to let go. And that's a tough thing when you're doing it to your own work.
So what came first, screenwriting or novel writing?
Novel writing came
Oh.
first. And then about, now I'm trying to do math in my head, 12 years ago was the first time I was approached about the possibility of someone um, optioning one of my books for the screen. And
Mhm.
while that didn't come to fruition there, it got me thinking if I can learn to be a screenwriter, I might be able to be part of this, or at
Oh.
least have a better understanding of the industry, in film. So I started studying it at that point and learning what I could and started practicing and writing screenplays so that I could maybe someday be part of the process. And that's what's happened with this movie. So that's been really great.
So how is it different from writing a novel? Do you have to kind of like almost have a vision of how people will set up the story much in a much different way than you would in a book?
Yeah, because everything's visual. So you don't have any internal narration, you don't have any internal thoughts. Everything has to be done visually and on the screen. And so that becomes a challenge. In novels, we spend time inside the heads of our characters. And when they're worrying about something, we're in their heads while they're worrying about it, or as they're
Mhm.
having realizations, or a better understanding of why they're doing the things they are comes from what we get to hear of their thoughts and their feelings. And that obviously doesn't happen on the screen. So you're adjusting for that. It's also going to be much, much shorter. So instead of a 350-page book, you have a 100-page screenplay to tell a similar story. So much has to be cut out of it and adjusted in that way. And once you hand over a screenplay, like you aren't there, generally speaking, to tell them, oh no, what I meant was, or no, the emotion's supposed to be. So it has to be written concisely enough and with all the information that you think they're going to need on the page while not putting so much in that you've bogged it down. So
Yeah.
you learn to be a very concise writer, and you learn, like I said, what is absolutely the heart and soul of a story, because that's about the only thing you're going to be able to get on the page. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it makes you a more focused writer, which is great.
That's so interesting because I do think we learn to adapt our styles for the audience, for the medium
Yeah.
that we're
Hmm.
using. And I hadn't ever thought of it. I think I would naturally go to think, oh, if I'm writing screenplay, I've got to think visually,
Yeah.
you know. Oh, so
Yeah,
interesting
very
how your
much.
career developed too, how you had the flow in your career and could build on them. and be
Yeah.
intentional about what you were doing. Like, okay, I'm going to go learn this and maybe it'll help. And here
Yeah,
you are.
yeah, and maybe it won't, right? But I think anytime as a creative, anytime we spend building our creative muscles, even if it's in a new medium, even if it's a hobby we don't plan to ever, monetize or make a career, it's just a creative outlet. I think anytime we do, we become better at what we're doing because we're building our skill set, but we're also finding joy in the creative process, which helps us bring that joy back into the creating that we do more as a career, because it's easy to lose that. It's easy for it to become very much our job and very much business, and we lose the joy that's there. So yeah, anything that brings joy back into the creative endeavor is worth it, even if it doesn't pan out maybe the way
Mm,
you thought it would.
that's really great advice. Do you have other advice for people who are thinking of going this route and look at you and go, oh, I want to be just like her. I want 85 books and have one of them become a movie. And
I teach I do guest lectures for creative writing classes at a university I live somewhat near. And, the very first time I went and did a lecture there, my daughter joked, it's like, "Are you gonna go there and tell them not to become writers?" Because she has been privy her whole life to the behind the scenes of being a published writer, and it is often a struggle, and it is often
Mhm.
frustrating, and it's often exhausting, and people don't see that on the other side. So she jokingly asked if I was going to discourage people from following their dreams. I said,
Yeah.
"No." Because at the end of the day, it is still the thing I would want to be doing with my life. It is still absolutely the job I'm so grateful I get to do, even on the days when it's tough. So I think the advice I tend to give people who are pre published is if you spend all of your time wishing for that next milestone, wishing for that next jump forward, you miss the joy of the stage you're in now. So
Mhm.
when you're pre-published and you're learning and you're figuring out what you want to write and who you want to be as a writer, that's an exciting time if you let yourself live in that moment. And then when you're published and the pressures come with that, you can still be grateful that I'm in this stage now. So finding the joy in the stage that you're in is huge.
Yeah.
And then I would tell people be flexible because it's hard to know where your career is going to take you. And learn all that you can about how to be better at the craft that you are pursuing, because I think there's always more to learn and there is joy and growth in the learning, and that helps keep
Mm.
us from stagnating. It helps keep us from being frustrated when there are setbacks because maybe you didn't win the award you wanted or didn't hit the bestseller list you wanted, or maybe you got rejected by a publisher you were hoping would pan out. We can't control those things. But if we're always working on building our skills and becoming better and finding the joy and the creative fulfillment that we can, we do control that. And then there
Mhm.
can be joy even when there are setbacks.
Yeah.
So that's the advice I tend to give people.
Oh, that sounds really, really good. Um, what, well, your books have been fiction, basically,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But your passion for history is kind of a nonfiction path, but
Right.
you work the two together, it sounds like. You have like this romantic genre of history and romance, and what else is better than that? I mean,
And whatever happens to pop into my brain. Yeah, no, there is, and that is such an interesting balance to strike because I do love studying history and I have a passion for history, but people don't pick up a work of fiction in order to get a history textbook.
right.
So you can't put in everything that you learn about history, and especially when you're writing in romance, which is meant to be a genre that leaves the reader feeling jubilant and joyful and uplifted. You can't necessarily dive
Mm.
into the deepest, darkest depths of difficult history. So it is such a balance to strike because you want to say, hey, come learn a little bit about history with me, while at the same time not turning it into, history 101,
Yeah.
and without it being something that pulls people down in this, because in this genre, that's not what they're expecting to have. So, yeah, it's such an interesting combination. I think I love that aspect of the challenge of it. It's part of what pulls me to it.
Do you think that it just seems like romance will never go out of style?
Mm-mm, ever.
Right? What do you think is underneath that? Is that our drive to be loved and in a way that is just unbelievable.
I think there's a lot of aspects to it. The romance genre, at least in the United Kingdom, the United States, where I know the history of it, emerged originally primarily written by women for women, based on the belief that women are capable of making choices for themselves and in their lives, that women's happiness should matter in the choices that are being made, that women can be trusted to direct their lives, and that there is benefit in love being part of the equation when it comes to building a life. And this was at a time when that was not at all what was believed. So I think there's power in it because it shows the importance of taking into account the impact of things on people. There is the promise that there are happy endings. There's the
Mhm.
promise that things can work out for good. And especially, I think we find that the sales of romance tend to surge at times when um, the world, as it were, is in a difficult place. When things feel darkest in the world, genres that offer light tend to surge. And I think that's one reason why, because when we look around ourselves and maybe don't see that promise of a happy ending or that promise of good things to come, to be able to read a story, to immerse ourselves in a story in which that is the promised outcome, there is
Mm,
some relief from the heaviness that we carry with us. And
yeah.
when it's written well, we believe that those people in that circumstance in those situations get their happy ending, and we celebrate with them, and it helps us cling to the hope that there are happy endings, that there are good things coming. So it's escapist fiction, but in the very best way, because what it's promising is good things can happen. It's a
Mhm.
promise of hope in a
Yeah.
world that too often is devoid of it. And I think that's where the popularity comes from. We want hope, and we want to know that we deserve to have a voice in our own hopeful lives and happy
Mhm.
endings. And that's what the romance genre promises.
Mm. Well, I don't mean this question as a quiz, but what was the first romantic novel written?
Oh, I don't know what the very first one would be. We have books that contained romance as an element, and
Uh-huh.
those have existed for quite a long time. And of course, it'll be different depending on what area of the world you're talking about. But we start to see romance as a genre tiptoeing into fiction, in at least in the United Kingdom, in the 1700s,
1700s. Okay.
becoming much more popular toward the end of that century. That's when we start to see Jane Austen's works tiptoeing in, and she was definitely not the first, but they're early on. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's when we tend to start seeing it there. But there were stories of romance before that, so it's
Yeah.
kind of a slow trickle before it becomes something very popular.
Well, I know that my listeners are all going to say, well, what's the name of the film we should look for? And the trailer's done, so it's coming. And when's it going to be available that we can all watch it? Any news on that that you can share with us?
Yeah, so the film's called Seeking Persephone. They said it's a retelling of Hades and Persephone. It is believed that it should have a theatrical run toward the end of this year, the end of 2025, and should
Okay.
arrive on streaming probably sometime next year. It'd be very awesome if that happened even faster than that, but I'm discovering that the wheels of the film industry turn every bit as slowly as the wheels of the publishing industry. So it's a lot of patience, which I'm learning to have.
Yeah. Well, is there what are ways that the listeners and viewers can follow you and I'll have this in the show notes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on my website, sarahmeden.com. There's also a place there to sign up for my newsletter, so you can get updates there. I'm also very active over on Instagram, Sarah_M_Eden. All kinds of book news, film news, you name it, it pops up over there. So yeah, I'm around and apparently very loud. You'll be able to hear from me in any of those places.
Terrific. So, Sarah, what would you tell your 20 something self today?
I think probably I wouldn't say a lot. I'd probably just give her a hug.
Oh,
I look back at myself in my 20s, and boy, like a lot of people, was going through a lot of stuff, but didn't have the life experience or viewpoint that we gain as we get older.
Mhm.
I feel like she just would need a hug and just encouragement. Keep going. You've got this. It's going to be okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think we could all give ourselves that little hug. It's all gonna
Right.
be okay. Believe
Right.
me.
For sure. Exactly. You're going to get through this. I promise.
Yeah. I think also too, you'll have your own path,
Yes. Don't you
like,
think that sometimes, like people will say, if you could go back and change something difficult that you were going through, would you? And I think actually probably not,
yeah,
because it's how we grow and how we learn, and who knows what that would change about the people we became and where life took us. So all
yeah.
we can really do is look back and be grateful for what we've learned and hope to keep doing better as we move forward.
So well said. And I know you had a chance to go to the online store to pick something. What did you pick for yourself?
So I absolutely fell in love with, I believe that it was called Finding Joy. It's a
Oh,
hummingbird in front
yeah,
of a sprig of flowers. I
yeah.
love birds. I have my whole entire life. And a little known fact about me, I was a physics major in college before I changed to a statistical data analysis major. And now I write romance novels, figure it out. But I started out in physics because I love it. And when I took AP Physics in high school, was absolutely fascinated as we studied the aspects of physics that allow birds to fly.
Uh-huh.
Newton's third law of motion, others, and the realization that what allows them to fly is opposition. As they
Um,
flap down, they're lifted up. As they push against air, the air pushes them higher. So it was kind of a life lesson to me in that moment that difficulties lift us and that strength is found in opposition. So I love
oh,
birds. They're all over my whole house. So that's the one I fell in love with.
well, thank you for that. Be my pleasure to send that to you. And
Love it.
yep. And Sarah, I cannot wait for this to get, and I hope that you'll let, with your newsletter and stuff, tell us when we can see things, and I'll share it with
Absolutely.
with the listeners, and
Thank
wish
you.
you all the best for that.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
What a beautiful and thought-provoking conversation with Sarah, a storyteller whose words remind us that creativity, like flight, often comes from resistance, and that hope is the quiet heartbeat behind every story worth telling. If today's episode inspired you, you can connect with Sarah at sarahmeden.com or follow her on Instagram for updates on her upcoming book series and the premiere of Seeking Persephone. Sarah's favorite from our Girl Take the Lead heartfelt cards and gift store was the Finding Joy card featuring a hummingbird in flight, a perfect symbol of her belief that strength is found in opposition and joy often lives in the lift. Explore this and other guest inspired designs at girltaketheleadpod.com/shop. Here's 3 key takeaways from today's conversation. 1, storytelling is an act of hope, a way to connect and heal across time. 2, opposition gives us strength. Resistance helps us rise higher. And 3, creativity flourishes when we rediscover joy in the process, not just the outcome. Joy lives in every day. It's often the smallest, most intentional moments that build resilience, presence, and connection. As always, thank you for listening, for sharing these stories, and for walking alongside me on this journey. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow the podcast, leave a review, or share it with someone who would love hearing about women leading change around the world. Next week, we'll be joined by Salvatore Manzi, a leadership communications coach and author of Clear and Compelling, who helps mission-driven leaders elevate their voice, presence, and power. With over 20 years of experience guiding changemakers from Genentech to the United Nations, Salvatore will share how we can all turn insights into influence and speak with a voice rooted in worth, wisdom, and unwavering determination. Until then, take care of your heart, lead with courage, and remember, we got this. Talk soon. Bye.